Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about 7 signs you need expert outside help with your pay strategy. Now, Ken assigned me this topic. He thought this would be useful, but I got to admit, it seems a little self-serving. Because this is what we do. So I'm going to take all the personal context out of this and really try to apply this as an advisor or an expert, identifying those things that possibly may trigger the need to get some outside help when you're developing, managing, operating, communicating your pay strategy. And we're going to do some polls. So these polls are going to pop up on the screen before I tell you each sign. So there are like 7 signs coming up, 7 indicators. Well, we're going to do a poll and get some feedback, and then we will talk about the sign that's associated with that poll. Does that make sense? It's pretty simple. You'll catch on. And I'd love any feedback we get through the session, questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll save some time at the end for some questions. I think we have, want to make sure I have enough people in here so our polls will be meaningful, but let's go ahead and dive in. Marley, let's do poll number 1. Try and get everybody in the session to participate so we get some feedback. This is going to be about your compensation philosophy at your company. How strong is your compensation philosophy as a decision-making tool? We have a clear, well-communicated philosophy that actively guides pay decisions. We have a philosophy, but it's only occasionally referenced. We're developing or revising our philosophy, or what the heck is a compensation pay philosophy? And we get some votes on this. Take your best guess for your organization. We need a few more voters here if we can. We don't have a huge group in this session yet, so everybody needs to participate and vote. Or we'll just go with what we have. So we have one where we have occasionally referenced, and we have one where we don't have one at all. So let's shift out of the poll for a second then, Marley, and let's talk about a compensation philosophy statement and its importance. So this is a crucial first step in creating a strategic, successful pay strategy. And the first sign that you may need help is that if your pay philosophy exists only on paper. So what is a pay philosophy? It's a statement, customarily about a page and a half, that outlines why you pay. What are the purposes of paying compensation within the organization? What are you trying to achieve? How do you define value creation that warrants performance-based pay? What are the outcomes that the organization is striving for that the pay is supposed to influence? Do you have an equity program? Do you pay at market or below market or above market? I have a guide here on the screen called An Approach to Compensation Philosophy Statement Design. And I actually have a template document that'll be available to you if you'd like it. This is ways to build a compensation philosophy statement. Imagine that you're hiring an employee and you're in the negotiation stage. You're about to make an offer. Before you actually extend the financial offer, imagine that you ask the candidate to first read our compensation philosophy statement. The philosophy statement will outline your beliefs and your philosophy of pay. And in doing so, you eliminate confusion or concerns in the future. If somebody comes back to you 9 months later and challenges their pay, you can say, well, did you read the pay philosophy statement? It's a statement that helps you really frame guiding principles and practices that your team should follow going forward as you operate your pay programs. So what this is a document that should be available to you through the playbook that says, here's how to think about a starting place for thinking about framing your own pay philosophy statement. Now, you can hire firms like ours, kind of the experts, if you want, to help you craft a statement. But without a philosophy statement, employees don't really know how to make decisions about pay in an accountable fashion. So accountability is a key factor here that we're striving for. So this may be helpful to you. It contrasts what we call a traditional, a professional, and an entrepreneurial approach to pay. And then it gives you a template for asking questions and answering the questions internally that enable you to begin your first draft of your pay philosophy statement. So that's kind of step number one. And that's a really important step for you to take in order to lay the groundwork for a successful compensation program. Okay, let's go on to poll number 2, Marley. Okay, this poll is about the strategic nature of your compensation decisions. Do you make compensations from decisions from a strategic perspective where you're aligned with business goals and proactively planning compensation ahead? Or is it mostly strategic, sometimes reactive when urgent needs arise? Is it reactive where you're often playing catch up instead of planning ahead? Or are you firefighting where compensation issues feel urgent and chaotic? So let's see if you can vote on what best represents how compensation works in your organization. Okay, this is good so far. No firefighters here, so that's good. And we have some that are fully aligned with their business goals. That's, of course, what you want to strive for. So let's pause the poll here and let's talk about how to identify and relate to a strategically aligned compensation. So when compensation feels reactive, that's a signal that you may need help. We want it to be strategic. So let's show a table that compares or contrasts the two. When you have reactive compensation, you're making pay decisions triggered by employee pressure or emergencies. We encourage companies to have an internal team or committee, the internal comp committee, not the board level committee, but the internal comp committee that's responsible for acting on and operating the pay strategy. Remember the pay philosophy statement. The committee is guided by the pay philosophy. This is the foundational element that makes compensation decision-making aligned with your business strategy. If you're making inconsistent adjustments, this creates pay inequities. We'll talk about pay inequities coming up more, but a consistent framework of pay grade structure ensures fairness and competitiveness. Fairness and competitiveness are the foundation of any good comp philosophy. When there's a perception that things aren't fair relative to compensation, whoa, morale is crushed. Again, we'll come back to that a little bit later. If leaders are spending time putting out comp fires, they don't have the time to focus on growth and making compensation decisions that operate in a smooth and effective fashion. If employees see comp as arbitrary or even worse, political, that's a disaster. So a common scenario is when you have two people in the same positions performing at roughly, let's say, the same level, but they have different pay levels, and they discover that hanging around the water cooler in an ad hoc exchange. Now you've got the perception of arbitrariness and unfairness. So employees want to see comp as purposeful and tied to business success. So you've got to really pay attention to the operational side of your pay strategy to make sure it's viewed as purposeful and employees are aligned. If short-term fixes dominate your pay operation and your pay decisions, that's not a good sign. And it could mean that you need some organizational help and refinement of the management conversations around pay. Long-term talent and business goals should drive your decision-making around pay. Okay, let's do poll number 3, Marley. Okay, how confident are you that your organization has addressed pay equity? We told you this was coming. Man, this is a huge issue now. Are you actively auditing, monitoring, and correcting disparities? Or would you say, well, we've done some analysis, but we haven't acted consistently or comprehensively? Or we suspect there may be issues, but haven't investigated yet? Or do you hide the topic under the rug? We avoid the topic or haven't taken any action at all? Let's get some feedback on this one. Don't be shy now. We need some more answers here. Okay, for some reason, I'm not seeing more responses. Hopefully, you're open to completing the questions. We're getting a little bit here. So pay equity, of course, relates to the precision with which your positions are properly pegged for pay levels. Okay, well, let's talk about the issue. Let's go back to the slides. Here's why this is crucial. Pay disparities will kill morale. I used the example earlier of 2 employees discovering they're in similar or comparable roles, but one discovers they're making $15,000 less than the other person. Well, that's not what you want them to find out, because that's not a good practice. And so you got to correct those kinds of conditions. Pay equity is one of the biggest issues now. And there's also very often legal issues associated with pay equity problems. So pay disparities will definitely kill morale. Here's how you can notice how serious this problem might be. If you ignore pay disparities, then they're going to be found out and discovered by word of mouth and comparisons. And the gaps need to be identified through proactive audits. This will encourage consistency and fairness, as we talked about earlier. If you ignore this issue, employees lose trust in leadership. Whereas if employees consistently feel that pay is managed effectively and fairly, then you increase confidence. This just either is going to be on the negative meter or on the positive meter consistently within the organization. When you ignore pay disparity issues, then morale quietly erodes and engagement drops, as well as retention. And when you address them proactively and communicate openly about your pay structure, this increases loyalty and pride and confidence. When pay disparities exist, then high performers will disengage or leave silently. They might tell you they're leaving just because they want a different career path, but the compensation issue may have become really the final straw. When you address pay disparities proactively, then retention is strengthened and turnover costs, which are deadly, will decline. When pay disparities are ignored, leaders will misdiagnose turnover as market issues instead of owning and communicating fairness clearly as the positive side of the pay disparity issue. If you ignore pay disparity concerns, then culture shifts through suspicion and resentment. It's deadly. But when you address them, culture shifts towards transparency and trust. Let's try our next poll. Encourage everybody to actively participate here. Let's see. This is about incentives. We're going to talk for a few minutes about incentives because, man, this is a crucial area. So do your incentive programs reinforce the outcomes you want? Yes, clearly drive desired performance and value creation. Mostly they work well overall. Mixed, we're seeing unintended or confusing consequences, or no, our incentives are driving the wrong behaviors. Let's get some votes here. Okay, another few seconds here if we got any more participants. Okay, so the largest set is that we're getting mixed or unintended or confusion consequences, and some are getting more positive results. So let's close out the poll and let's talk about incentive programs. So this is our specialty. We consider ourselves to be the top performing platform for incentive plans for mid-market companies. So we spent a lot of time on this subject. Let me share a few thoughts on this. So your incentive programs, and we actually dislike the term incentive. We use it so that people know what we're talking about, but we avoid it because it sounds like we're dangling carrots. We prefer the term value sharing value with employees who help create value. And there's been a lot of studies on incentives and whether they work or not. And there's more evidence that they don't work as they are applied than that they do work. There are billions of dollars being spent on incentive plans in the country that are actually generating the wrong behaviors. We've got a lot of white papers and reports on this subject if you want to go to our website and study this up. But let's think about the effect and why incentive plans often backfire. So let's look at a spectrum. So instead of two categories, we're going to have three here. On the left, we're going to talk about over-engineered incentive plans. And on the far right, we're going to talk about overly simplistic, not just simplistic, but overly simplistic incentive plans. We're going to try and find a balance in the middle, the sweet spot here with what we call a value sharing plan. So an over-engineered incentive plan is where you have too many metrics, formulas, or expectations, and employees lose track. This is where you're trying to manage behavior with an incentive plan. That's the carrot. Now, that sounds counterintuitive. Of course, you want behavioral efforts that will lead to the outcomes you're seeking in the organization. But motivation is intrinsic, and you want employees to behave in a fashion that will create the best results for the organization without feeling like they're being manipulated or overly managed. And when you give somebody 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 metrics to manage, they're going to lose interest. It's going to become distracting and too complicated. So many plans we see are just too metrics heavy. When you jump over to the far right, now you see plans that are too subjective, or what we'll call ad hoc. Smaller companies typically begin here, but we see large companies that still do this. This occurs when the owner, the board, the CEO decides at the end of the year, how do we do? How are profits? Okay, let's pay some bonuses. And there's a table, a chart worked out, an Excel spreadsheet, and it's decided so-and-so is getting $500 and somebody else is getting $5,000. Unpredictable. And therefore, employees can't really do anything to impact it other than satisfy the perception that the CEO may have about them. So in the middle, what we want are clear, focused measures tied to the most important metrics that the company is striving to achieve, 1 or 2 generally. Now, on the over-engineered side, that confusion that emerges, they don't know what really matters. And on the far right, employees don't see any connection to their performance if it's too simplistic, meaning it's an ad hoc subjective plan. What we want is an easy to understand and explain program. I have an acronym I call CAM, C-A-M. C is clear, A is achievable, M is meaningful. So you want the employees to hear the explanation of the plan. You want them to say, okay, that's clear. I get how the plan works, and I get what I'm supposed to do to optimize the value of the plan. Achievable means they go, yes, we can achieve those results. We can move towards that and achieve those results. And M means it's meaningful. If I earn that award, that'll be meaningful to me. If you don't check all three boxes, you lose the power and the motivational impact of the program. So it's got to be easy to understand, and then they can go home and explain it to their partner, their spouse, their daughter, or their dog, or whomever, and it's clear to them as well. Okay, with an over-engineered plan, people look for ways to game the system, and you get this siloed behavior where they produce the results, but potentially sacrificing something else that was important to the organization. We built a plan years ago, many years ago, for a hotel chain where they wanted their desk clerks to encourage upsells, moving people up into the suite or with the better view or whatever. And so they incentivized people to do that. And we were responsible for that plan. But what happened was the front desk became too aggressive, and their customer satisfaction scores dropped, and there were complaints from customers that they felt a little pressured by some of the desk clerks. So you have to watch for that. They manipulated this plan to drive their results, but it was not to the betterment of the company. So some other things were factored back into the plan where the employees were basically taught, let's learn what the profitability means for the hotel so that we can, how we treat the customers while also having an eye on company value is what's important. If we go overly simplistic, what creates value for the organization is a question the employees cannot answer. We want employees to know what are the real underlying value creation efforts of the organization. And when we find that spot in the middle, now we can drive alignment with the business goals. So another factor of an over-engineered plan is it focuses on short-term box checking. Okay, I checked this goal off. I checked that goal out. This can diminish innovation and creativity. Overly simplistic plans will probably demotivate high performers who want to look at lofty, meaningful goals and want to know that their agility and their flexibility is being rewarded. In the center, people know what true value creation is, and that's what you're rewarding for. Over-engineered plans are hard to track. There's an administrative burden, and there's low trust as people don't know what really matters. Overly simplistic plan, no one really knows what to expect. They just wait and see what they get at the end of the year. You want transparency. You want it to be fair and sustainable. So we got to eliminate the low motivation associated with over-engineered plans, and especially get rid of the entitlement mentality with simple plans that have no formal context. We want to create an ownership mindset, growth partners, impact players who get it. So there's much more we have available to you on how to build those kinds of plans, but incentive plans are crucial to getting right to have an effective pay strategy. And if it's not working for you, it could be an indicator of a need for some outside help. Okay, let's do poll number 5. Okay, how easy is it for your organization to manage compensation and help employees understand its value? Okay, make sure we can say very effective. Compensation is well managed. Employees clearly understand and appreciate their total rewards. It's mostly effective. Comp is generally well managed, but employees don't always see the value of their full opportunity. We're struggling. Management compensation is significant effort. Employees often misunderstand or undervalue they pay, or it's a little chaotic. Compensation feels a little disorganized and difficult to manage. So we've got a few different responses here across the spectrum. We don't have any very effectives. But I tell you, if you think of compensation as an investment instead of an expense, it can change the way you begin to manage compensation. Most companies don't know the total spend or the total investment for their compensation plan. If you add up all salaries, benefits, payroll taxes, and everything else, it's a big number. It's the biggest number on everybody's payroll. And if you start thinking, wow, if I was investing that money with a wealth manager, I'd really expect some accountability and a return. The more effectively compensation is managed, the better the return's going to be for the shareholders, and the more value can be shared with employees. So let's close this poll and let's look at when this is an indication that there might be a need for some help. So compensation complexity is overwhelming your team. Compensation usually falls to the HR team. And depending on the size of the company, it takes a while before they really have compensation expertise there. They're usually struggling to deal with a handful, multiple compensation issues in the organization. So here's how you can see when complexity rules versus simplicity in management. If HR is spending hours calculating payouts and adjusting compensation ranges and answering questions, that's the first thing that is the foundation of comp complexity or comp chaos. If HR is focusing on strategy and not firefighting, now they have a seat at the table, and the collaboration with the CEO and CFO is meaningful. If complexity rules, managers can't explain pay decisions confidently. That's a serious problem. Managers need to be able to communicate pay clearly and credibly. If an employee inquires of their manager about why their pay is at a certain level, you want them to be able to give confident answers. Complexity rules when employees don't understand or value their rewards, but simplicity wins when employees see and appreciate the full value of their compensation. We like to illustrate the future value of their compensation as well, rather than just the historic value. Another way that complexity rules is when constant exceptions and special deals are being made, and people pick up on that and they sense, how do I get a special deal? They're concerned about fairness. Consistency is lacking. Complexity rules when leadership senses problems but lacks visibility. They're not quite sure how to put their finger on those problems. Leadership needs to trust that pay is aligned with strategy and move on to execution of the business plan. If compensation feels like a black box, that's challenging. You need compensation to feel like a clear, motivating opportunity. Let's go to poll number 6, Marley. Okay, how confident are key stakeholders in your pay strategy? So we're talking about your owners, shareholders, your board, your investors. Are they very confident? They like the pay strategy and confident that it's driving results? Or are they generally supportive with occasional questions? Or do they possibly have growing concerns where confidence is low, challenges are becoming more frequent? Or is confidence pretty low? Are they pushing back or demanding change? Love to see that one at the top. Board shareholders are consistently supportive. That's what you want, because now they're open to new ideas. Let's think about the concept of measuring the return on that compensation investment. Let's close the poll out and talk about indicators of success or potential needs. So if your board or investors are questioning your pay strategy, when they're questioning, they're going to ask for more data all the time, benchmarks, justification for recommendations. Hey, we want to add this feature or this, or change this, or change the pay level for this person. What's the justification for it? If the justification is based on rationale that's tied to the business strategy and presented in advance, they're more likely to be satisfied. If they're raising concerns about dilution on the equity side or costs or misalignment, as opposed to seeing pay as a disciplined tool to drive shareholder value, you want this conversation to be very proactive and collaborative. If they are sensing delays, or you're sensing delays or blocking approval of plans, that's a challenge. So now we want to make sure that they're supportive because they're endorsing and championing the company's approach to pay. If they're focusing on risks and unintended consequences, not a good sign. You want them to see how the compensation strategy is driving growth and long-term value creation. If they feel defensive and react, or if you're feeling defensive and reactive with their questions, that's not good. They want a confident management leadership perspective on compensation. And they're going to be reluctant to prove new approaches unless they can see the return on investment. So there are some pretty interesting ways to measure the return on investment on pay. We probably won't have time to go into that today much, but when they can see actual hard numbers, boy, that's really a positive outcome. Let's do number 7. Then we'll take some questions. Okay, your equity program for your leadership team or beyond your leadership team, or perhaps phantom equity. Is it achieving its purpose? Yes, it's motivational, it retains talent, and we manage dilution effectively, or mostly it works overall, but could be improved. Problematic, employees don't understand it or value it, or no, we don't offer equity, or it's become a major pain point. Okay, so we're across the spectrum here a little bit too. We've got each box checked. You know, in this day and age, even in private companies, an equity, or what we often recommend, a phantom equity plan, is really essential. They're becoming more and more common, almost ubiquitous. Without one, you can't really paint a long-term wealth creation opportunity for your leadership team. So let's close the poll and look at our last slide here. So if your equity or phantom equity program is causing more problems than it solves, you could need some outside help. So when it causes problems, employees don't understand how it works. And what you need is employees to clearly see how their actions build value and what their potential opportunity is with that program. Highlighting the potential value of their equity on an ongoing basis is essential. It causes problems by creating an entitlement or unmet expectations. That's a serious challenge, and it's a wasted investment, isn't it? You want them to see how the value of that plan rewards high performance and differentiates their own individual contribution as well. Investors are worried about dilution or the liability, meaning the phantom equity liability. We want to make sure they see a disciplined use of the company equity and avoid as much financial or actual dilution as possible. Distrust can grow as outcomes disappoint. So a consistent strategy that's reviewed, that's agile, that's adaptive is important. You want your outcomes to match the communicated pay philosophy. And you also don't want it to become a distraction or a headache. So there are ways to correct, because over time, the equity program can become a little outdated, needs to be modernized. You need it as the key, essential, most important element of your compensation strategy as a magnet for retention and motivation. So here are the kind of the differences in terms of the outcomes. If you look at the right side, if you address compensation strategically, your decisions are going to be consistent, fair, and trusted, and going to strengthen your culture. If you're operating at a strategic level, costs are going to be controlled. Leaders are focused on growth rather than reactivity. Pay equity eliminates the challenges about fairness and consistency. Aligned incentives focuses people on the right outcomes rather than trying to manipulate behaviors. Simplicity and transparency saves time at the HR level, saves staff, makes things operate like a well-oiled machine. Employees begin to value their rewards because they understand them. And stakeholder confidence. Let's report to your stakeholders the actual return on the compensation investment. Why is it higher this year or lower than last year? What are the plans to adjust? And lastly, your equity program. Minimize dilution, but still be generous in making sure you're attracting and retaining your key talent. That's what I've got for you. And I'd be happy, Marley, do we have some questions? If you want to read off any questions for me.
We do. We've had a lot of good questions in the Q&A. I will pull up some of our highest voted questions and put them on stage for you.
Okay.
First of all, from Jeff, should our compensation philosophy incorporate key performance indicators based on position, or is that too down in the weeds?
Yeah, that's a little down in the weeds, Jeff. You want the compensation philosophy statement to basically say, we will incorporate key performance indicators such as, and maybe give an example or two, but then point out that the KPIs for the company might change from year to year, and that for any individual initiative performance expectations, they'll be arranged on with the and settled with the employee's manager. So you want to keep it a little more high level in that compensation philosophy statement. Okay, next question.
Absolutely. Here's another one. How do I know if I am using too many metrics in our incentive plan?
Okay, well, so let's think about it from an individual's perspective. If I'm an employee and I have to think about more than 3 or 4 things, I'm going to start diluting my attention beyond what you probably want me to do. If you're using my individual performance goals as an influencer of my individual award, you don't want to, if it's weighted less than about 15%, even 20% for me, I ignore that in favor of those that are higher weighted. So it's kind of, it when you see it. We generally start with this: fund the plan, the first level of funding for the incentive plan, at a company level based on profits and occasionally revenue if you're in a rapid growth mode. So employee knows if we hit certain profit thresholds, maybe our base level, our targeted level, and a superior level, that's going to fund a value for me, possibly tied to my percentage of my salary. Now modify it based upon the employee's individual performance. And again, we got a lot of content on our website and papers that give you more refined answers, but it is kind of you'll know it when you see it issue. The fewer metrics, the better. Marley?
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. We have just about 2 more minutes for one last question from Tish. Is there an optimal stage in a company's growth or transformation when outside help for pay strategy is most impactful?
Okay, so here we're looking at overall pay strategy. So when a company's small, when they're just getting started, well, who's managing pay strategy? Well, it's the owner or the CEO, right? And now as they grow and through stages, let's talk about employee growth to 50, to 100, to 300, to 500. You're still owning pay strategy, usually in the C-suite, but the complexity and the chaos is becoming intense. So it's usually helpful at, I would say, the 100 to 200 employee level to get some outside help, somebody that can help you frame a pay strategy that is aligned with the business strategy. That'd be kind of the rule of thumb I toss out, Tish. But the earlier, the better. The sooner you start addressing pay as a strategic investment in companies' growth, and just like you're building out your go-to-market strategy and your product development strategy, your compensation strategy should be treated the same way as soon as possible in the organization. Okay, are we done about it,
Wonderful.
Marley?
Thank you so much, Tom. Those are all the questions we have time for. Everyone
Okay.
attending, we have a couple more polls that have come up if you'd like to fill those out to receive more information about VisionLink and to let us know how valuable Tom's content was today. That's super helpful for us. And I will see you all in the next session. Thank you
Thanks,
again, Tom.
everybody.
That was wonderful.
Thanks, Marley. Thanks, everybody.